On today's World Insight with Tian Wei, Xi Jinping wraps up his state visit to the DPRK. How will this pivot the conversation at the G20 summit? And we'll get up close and personal with the Huawei CEO Ren Zhengfei, along with American tech gurus and thinkers.
Hello and welcome to World Insight with me, Tian Wei. The program is coming to you on CGTN. We begin in the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, where Chinese President Xi Jinping wraps up the second and the last day of his first ever state visit to the country, where he has been warmly received by his counterpart, Chairman Kim Jong-un. This year marks the 70th anniversary of the diplomatic ties between China and the DPRK. So what's the significance of this historical visit? And how do China and DPRK ties play into the two countries' international strategies? Before we talk to our panelists, take a look at this.
President Xi Jinping's first visit to the DPRK was the first by a top Chinese leader in 14 years. It's also the fifth face-to-face meeting between the two leaders in the last 15 months. After a warm reception by thousands of local residents, Xi and Kim sat down at the Kumsusan Palace of the Sun, where their talks focused on bilateral relations and regional concerns. The Chinese president stressed that Beijing is willing to offer assistance that could guarantee Pyongyang's appropriate internal security, while vowing to play an active and constructive role in maintaining peace on the Korean peninsula. Xi spoke highly of Pyongyang's efforts to push forward the denuclearization of the peninsula and calls for political settlement on the issue. Meanwhile, Kim says Xi's visit can help shape future relations and extend their unbreakable bond, just like one family. Kim added his country will remain patient regarding nuclear talks, even though the relevant party, with no name given, has failed to respond to his overtures. The meeting was followed by a welcome banquet and grand art performance. President Xi and his wife Peng Liyuan joined an audience of over 100,000 at the May 4th Stadium, watching a variety of performances including well-known DPRK art gymnastics, orchestras, and a number of Chinese songs. Before wrapping up the tour, President Xi also paid a visit to the China-DPRK Friendship Tower, built in 1959, a symbol of the two neighbors' long-standing friendship.
This is a friendly visit and a very successful one. During his meeting with Chairman Kim Jong-un, President Xi clearly pointed out some key areas for the further development of China-DPRK relations, including close high-level exchanges, strengthening strategic communication, and deepening cooperation in practical areas. He also stressed the importance to communicate on governance and economic construction.
The trip ended with Kim and his wife bidding Xi's delegation a fond farewell at Pyongyang Airport, where Xi also reviewed the DPRK's honor guard before boarding.
For more on Xi Jinping's visit to Pyongyang, in Boston, we have Sun-Young Lee, a Kim Cook Career Foundation professor of Korean Studies at the Fletcher School, Tufts University. In Washington, D.C., Michael O'Hanlon, a senior fellow from the Center for 21st Century Security and Intelligence, director of the Research for Foreign Policy at the Brookings Institution. Last but not least, in our Beijing studio, Zhao Tong, associate at the Carnegie Tsinghua Center for Global Policy. Gentlemen, welcome to our program. In the long run, Mr. Zhao, how do you think this visit by Chinese President Xi Jinping to DPRK, first time 14 years between the two countries, likely to be recorded about?
I think it will be recorded in history as a very important moment for DPRK-China bilateral relationship, which actually started last year when North Korea decided to focus on economic development rather than nuclear development. But that really paved the ground for the bilateral relationship to quickly recover and to improve. And this visit, the first visit by the Chinese top leader in 14 years, and also on the 70th anniversary of the bilateral relationship, could further promote the bilateral relationship in a wide range of areas.
Yeah.
There will be more social exchanges, people-to-people exchanges, academic dialogues, sports exchanges,
so building up
cultural,
mainly the fabrics of this bilateral relations even more. Mr. O'Hanlon, though, how much do you think this bilateral relations will be about the third party, or not at all?
I hope that this can be a positive step in the China-North Korea relationship, but just as Donald Trump has gotten along better with Kim Jong-un, by itself, that is really nothing to brag about. So the economic reform that my colleague just mentioned, that can help. That can help improve the economic well-being of North Koreans, but we're going to have to see also a lightening in some of the political and gulag kind of conditions inside of North Korea.
Mr. O'Hanlon, I have to say that Mr. Trump could play a positive role, instrumental role, but he chose to walk away from the last round of discussion with the DPRK leader. Now, we do not know whether there is going to be any future agenda for interactions. Obviously, engagement will be a way to have your opinions heard and have both sides work towards certain kinds of directions. And that has been thrown away by Washington so far. So, Mr. Zhao, China alone, how much can they play?
Well, I would agree with my colleague in D.C. that improving bilateral relationship is not a goal in itself. The Chinese goal is very clear. China wants to promote denuclearization. In fact, China and Russia have been working on a proposal on a denuclearization roadmap, and maybe this China-Russian proposal will be presented to the North Korean leader, may have already been presented to the North Korean leader during the visit. And also, China understands the importance of improving human rights in DPRK. That's why China wants to enhance people-to-people exchange, help North Korea develop not only its economy but also its society. That's helping North Korea coming out of its isolation is the best way to make North Koreans feel safer and therefore impose less restriction on their population. So I think that's we are sharing the same exact goals when we deal with North Korea.
Professor Lee, of course, China's relation with the DPRK is much more than just namely the diplomacy of engagement. It was a traditional friendship back 70 years ago, and this is also the year when China established the People's Republic of China. So, Professor Lee, how much do you think China and the DPRK, when they further interact with one another, will be able to push forward, whether it's the reform and economic agenda within the DPRK, and also the possibility of a more open region in Northeast Asia, particularly on the Korean Peninsula? Professor Lee.
China-North Korea relations, a very special bilateral relationship forged in blood, actually predates the establishment of the People's Republic 70 years ago. North Korea sent tens of thousands of troops to fight alongside the Chinese Communist Party in the Chinese Civil War between 1941 and 1949. So it's a very special relationship at the same time. And this visit by President Xi is made possible because Kim Jong-un changed his ways in 2018. So it's a gift from the Chinese point of view. At the same time, will China be able to really push Kim Jong-un to introduce genuine reform and opening? Only if China is willing to go beyond subsidization of the North Korean state.
Mr. Zhao, may I come back to you as well? Given the fact you heard from the two American guests that the demands coming from the U.S. side could be paramount in terms of what China should do, I should say, I should act, I should provide to the DPRK. Well, the U.S. side has been providing nothing, engaging nothing, I have to say, since the last round of discussion broke down. and also not necessarily provide any kinds of momentum or initiative either. So China will easily be this figure, be blamed by the United States for whatever failure that Washington has failed to achieve. Mr. Zhao.
I just want to firstly respond briefly to the comment of American colleague. First of all, China is not simply subsidizing the North Korean nation. There is a Chinese saying, to teach one how to fish is better than giving one fish. So what China is doing, trying to help North Korea set up its domestic system to be able to develop its economy by its own means. As a result, if North Korea is able to become a self-reliant nation, not causing trouble for outside world, I think that's a bless for everyone in this region. And going back to the nuclear issue, as I said, China, during the months when the nuclear negotiation between DPRK and the United States was deadlocked, China and Russia are making real progress to try to resolve a major obstacle for making progress, which is to come to a consensus agreement on what the roadmap for denuclearization should look like. I think similar efforts from other countries in that direction would be encouraged. And China, at a time when neither Washington nor Seoul is able to resume talks with DPRK, is paying a state visit to DPRK and is using its special influence with DPRK to try to jumpstart this talk on denuclearization again. I'm sure denuclearization has been the important topic between President Xi and Chairman Kim, and maybe we will hear more announcements following this summit about more progress.
What's interesting, Mr. O'Hanlon, is how Washington will react to that. Will react to that with just some nice words, no action? Or react to that with even harsher words? Or react to that with some real strategic thinking? What do you think, sir?
It's a good question. First of all, I commend China for the role it's trying to play, and I agree with you and with some of the other comments this morning, or this show, that in fact we have mostly common goals in regard to North Korea. Beijing and Washington should be natural partners. I think we have to keep the sanctions in place until we see meaningful denuclearization, but that raises your question of what would a meaningful strategy be? What's a fair compromise? And I actually think the Hanoi summit could point the way if the two sides can now start to make real concessions. To me, the basic compromise that we should be envisioning is that North Korea give up its ability to produce nuclear weapons or nuclear materials anywhere and everywhere on its territory. And in exchange, most, if not all, of the UN sanctions can be suspended and then lifted. North Korea can keep some of its weapons for a while. We will keep some of the American sanctions for a while. We won't try to solve the entire problem right away, but we get rid of the production infrastructure verifiably in exchange for a suspension and a lifting of UN sanctions. I think that should be the common strategy. I think it's a fair compromise for everyone. I hope President Xi may recommend that to Kim Jong-un during his visit.
How do you see this rather complicated time, shall I say, as Professor Lee and Mr. O'Hanlon analyze about South Korea, analyze about DPRK, and also the U.S. stance? This is an issue and the bilateral relations in an ever-changing region, and certainly some even argue paradigm change time. So how do you see the recent visit by Chinese President Xi to the DPRK, the first time in 14 years? Those numbers are relevant and important in a way in helping us to understand something. What exactly is that thing, Mr. Zhao?
Well, I think the moment of this visit is really important. As Mr. O'Hanlon said, the U.S. is talking tough. Well, I agree with Mr. O'Hanlon that there is real room for making an interim deal on denuclearization. North Korea recently indicated that if both countries are willing to make some concessions, more concessions, there can be a deal. So I think North Korea is ready to soften its position a little bit, maybe on the basis of what North Korea offered at Hanoi, North Korea might be willing to also shut down some additional fissile material production facilities outside Yongbyon, and therefore implementing a comprehensive freeze on its nuclear program. And that could provide a better basis for resuming talks. The problem is, however, DPRK and the United States are not talking to each other. They are posturing strongly and they are talking tough. So the visit by China can provide a gold opportunity for North Korea to say that, okay, I'm now willing to offer more concessions, not because of pressure from the United States, but because of the good proposals and advice from China. So it could be a face-saving way for North Korea and also for the United States to resume talks in the near-term future.
Interesting. Mr. O'Hanlon, though, you know, when you govern, you try to see priorities. If one button does not work, for example, the talk between Pyongyang and Washington directly did not work for now because of the lack of interest coming from President Trump, then could Pyongyang be able to push the other button, which is maybe work harder on its economic development and bring a bit better quality of life to its people? After all, that's going to earn itself more credibility in the international community. That could also, of course, correlate with the 1 year's choice already of opening up the country and more for economic development. Mr. O'Hanlon, what do you think about these priorities that Pyongyang could choose from?
Well, I think you're right. And in fact, I believe that's North Korean policy under what they call Byungjin, trying to have a strong economy and a strong military at the same time. And now that they have perhaps several dozen nuclear bombs, you could argue that their priority should turn towards the economy, and that would fit with Kim Jong-un's stated strategy. But that's going to require lifting of some of the international sanctions that have been so painful. And you mentioned that President Trump walked away from Hanoi, and I think you're right that he needs to do more. But I also think it's worth taking note that Kim Jong-un demanded a lifting of the sanctions in Hanoi in exchange for a very limited amount of denuclearization. So I think the ball is also in his court to now choose. If he really wants to implement Byungjin, I think it's time to recognize he has a nuclear deterrent that is sizable enough that he does not need to keep expanding it or modernizing it. And so he should give up not only the nuclear testing, and I commend him for that, he's already done that, but give up the nuclear infrastructure needed to make more bombs, hold on to that arsenal for a while, and then get most of the international and UN sanctions lifted so he can do what you said and develop that economy.
Professor Li, of course, very interesting, Mr. Zhao earlier talking about you know, the way how the two countries are interacting now. Professor Li, what kind of momentum would that provide Washington? Because the Chinese President Xi is to meet President Trump very soon during the G20 summit. They could discuss a whole range of issues, which could include the DPRK nuclear issue. And therefore, Washington could also have a face-saving moment in which President Trump could well claim that, you know, I talked to my Chinese colleagues, and my Chinese colleagues told me certain good news, and therefore, I would like to say and do this toward the DPRK to give them a little bit new momentum to act in a positive direction. So, Professor Li, how much do you think Washington today and President Trump is willing to take advantage of this opportunity as China going between these two countries?
Well, Ms. Tian, you've basically laid out what's going to happen next week in Japan at the G20 summit.
I don't know what's going to happen, Professor Li.
The United States is a bit concerned about recent developments. It will happen exactly the way you put it, because President Trump will say, yes, my good friend President Xi leaned on Chairman Kim, said the right things, and yes, I will take advantage of this new opportunity. That's the practical approach, and it's no secret, of course, that the U.S. has been really leaning on, depending on China to carry out U.S. policy toward North Korea over the past decades, resorting various to moral suasion, you're a great civilization, responsible stakeholder, please put some pressure on North Korea, and things like that. So President Trump, in the end, will welcome the message that President Xi will announce to the world in Osaka, in Japan, next week.
We're almost running out of time, gentlemen. As we discuss, things are also evolving. So before we go, a final sentence or two from every one of you, gentlemen. What do you think should be the kind of directions that all sides can drive the conversation and the interaction going? Let's go with Professor Li first. Professor.
Well, if we are able to have an agreement in writing that even approaches the September 19th, 2005 joint statement, or even the 1994 Geneva Accord, at this point that would be progress, because the Singapore Agreement consisted of very terse, short 4 paragraphs. It was very broad and ambiguous. So that would be progress if Trump and Kim were able to put down on ink, on paper, a more detailed agreement sometime this year.
We hope that will be the case. Well, nobody knows. Mr. O'Hanlon, your take.
Thank you. I'll just reiterate my goal, which I think is the reasonable compromise. The North Koreans hold on to their bombs that they already have produced for now, but they give up, verifiably, all of their production capability nationwide. They stop making more bombs, stop modernizing and testing, and in exchange, the UN sanctions are suspended and then lifted. The American sanctions can stay in place, but the UN sanctions are more critical because that's what impedes China and South Korea and other countries in Asia from interacting economically with the North. So I think that's the right compromise to aim for.
Last but not least, Mr. Zhao.
Well, I think it's possible that we can achieve some near-term deal. We should strive to prevent North Korea's nuclear capability from further growing and advancing. If that can be achieved soon after these summit meetings, then I think U.S. should seriously consider lifting some sanctions. And then that will make all the previous North Korean efforts to set up special economic zones to produce real results, to improve the living standard of North Korean people.
All right, Zhao Tong, Sanyong Li, Michael O'Hanlon, thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining this discussion. Thank you for your insights. You're watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei. Still to come on our program, we'll get up and close and personal with Huawei CEO Ren Zhengfei, along with American tech gurus and thinkers right after this break. Welcome back. You're still watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei. The program is coming to you Monday to Friday on CGTN. Let's turn to the brewing trade war between the two world's largest economies. Amid the gloomy atmosphere and the rise of protectionism, Chinese telecom giant Huawei has become a target of the U.S. government over so-called national security concerns. Earlier, at Huawei's Shenzhen headquarters, I hosted a special discussion of 3 thinkers: Ren Zhengfei, Huawei founder and CEO; George Gilder, American tech guru and futurist; and Nicholas Negroponte, a tech visionary and co-founder of the MIT Media Lab. The 3 discussed the issues ranging from how Huawei will deal with the U.S. trade ban to security concerns about Huawei's 5G network. They also share insights on how society will look like in the age of artificial intelligence and blockchain technology. Minds without borders. Let's listen in.
At any rate, but we agree on that he would reconsider Huawei if we can make a trade deal. So clearly it's not about national.
It's the United States that really will suffer from any effort to decouple.
华为是不会 有任何的后门。
少量问题的挫折，我们也不能恨一个美国。
For the very first time.
谢谢。你看。
Hello and welcome to A Coffee with Ren. I'm Tian Wei. They say a good conversation could be just like drinking a cup of black coffee, as stimulating and probably as hard. Well, I'm not sure whether today's conversation is going to be a really difficult one, but certainly stimulating intellectually and thought-provoking if you take a look at the panelists on the stage. They are trailblazers in their respective fields and certainly very outspoken about the challenges that we are facing today. First up, A Coffee with Ren, so let's start with Ren. Ren 先生, so you can't go to the U.S. anymore, that's why you bring all your friends to China for coffee?
尼古拉斯先生呢是乔布斯的老师。
Professor Negroponte was a teacher of Steve Jobs, and his son was once Jobs' roommate. That means by becoming his student today, I am becoming one of Jobs' peers. I feel very honored.
我感到无上的光荣。
That's it? What about George? 那 George 呢？
多是呢，他给那个我们黄老师写了一本书，写了序言。
For Mr. Gilder, he wrote the preface for Built on Value, a book by Professor Huang Weiwei. The preface is excellent, and I greatly admire him.
我非常崇拜他。
Okay, but I want to turn the table to both of you here. Aren't you being afraid of being politically incorrect? Coming to China and sitting here in the sitting room of Huawei, while knowing what's going on between U.S. and China?
No, I think that I can contribute to saving the United States in this from a terrible mistake that it's currently making, epitomized by their stupid bans and tariffs and restrictions on Huawei. But also, I can contribute to reconstruction of internet architecture to address the terrible security collapse across the internet that makes everybody paranoid and nobody trusts anybody else. And it's really a technical problem that Huawei can address, not a political problem.
Are we facing a technical problem or a political problem, Nicholas?
I am more of the feeling that we're facing a cultural problem. I was on the Motorola board of directors for 15 years. One of the first joint ventures you did was probably with Motorola. I suspect it was. And my interest is open information, open science. I come from a world where what we value isn't so much trade and commerce and stock values. We value knowledge, and we want to build on the people before. And the only way this works is if people are open at the beginning, and we can all build on each other. And that's, to me, the priority. There are other issues, and I'm not denying them, but that's the one I'm focused on. How does the world collaborate? It's not a competitive world in the early stages of science. It benefits from collaboration.
Mr. Ren, someone says it is a technical issue and some believe it's a cultural issue. Then what do you think? What kind of issue are we facing here?
我觉得人类社会的最主要的目的是要创造财富，使更多的人来摆脱贫穷。那社会呢，一定是要是合作共赢的。
I think the most important goal for our society is to create wealth so that more people can be lifted out of poverty. Social progress requires collaboration for shared success. It's simply impossible for individual countries to develop on their own in the information world. In the industrial era, transportation problems led to geopolitics and geoeconomics, so a country could manufacture sewing machines and tractors entirely on its own. But in the information era, it's impossible for a country to single-handedly make anything. That's why open collaboration worldwide is a must. Only through open collaboration can we meet people's demands and bring the benefits of new technologies to more people at lower costs.
让更多人享受到新的技术带来的这个福祉。我认为人类社会还是要走向一种共同的合作发展，才是一条真正的道路。
I believe collaboration is the only way to make social progress. Economic globalization was first proposed in the West. We believe it is a great concept. There definitely have been and will be ups and downs during the process of economic globalization, and we need to take the right approaches to these ups and downs. That means we need to use laws and rules to reconcile and resolve issues instead of imposing extreme restrictions.
而不是采取一种极端的方法。人类的文明呢，往往是科学家有了发现。
The progress of human civilization is built upon the discoveries and innovations of scientists, the leadership and facilitation of politicians, the products and markets of entrepreneurs, and the joint efforts of all people. That's how we create new wealth. During the Dark Ages, famine was prevalent in Europe. About 40 to 50 years ago, China was very poor, and people suffered from hunger. But now we have an abundance of food. Why is that? It's not because the natural environment has changed much since then. It is the result of advances in science and technology.
就是科学技术的进步，给人类带来了新的幸福。
I think, Mr. Ren, you sound very philosophical. I'm going to ask you a very concrete question. That is, what are you going to do with those American companies who do not provide Huawei anymore, components and parts, despite of the fact you had contracts before?
第一点呢，这个美国公司他们是富有道德良心的。
All of the U.S. companies that we work with are great companies that hold themselves to high standards in terms of business integrity and ethics. Huawei's development over the past 30 years can be attributed in large part to the support and help we have received from leading companies around the world. The current setbacks we are facing are not caused by those American companies, but by politicians who see things differently from the way we see them. We predicted long ago that we would encounter market competition issues and conflicts when our growth is fast, but we never imagined that the U.S. government would be so committed to attacking Huawei within such a broad scope. The U.S. government is banning U.S. companies from supplying components to us. They are also restricting our participation in international organizations and our cooperation with universities. That said, these restrictions will not stop Huawei from forging ahead. We did not expect that the U.S. government would launch such precise strikes against us, with each strike hitting our vital parts. We did not expect such extreme measures, but we did make some preparations. We are like a bullet-riddled aircraft during World War II. We are prepared to protect our core components only, like our fuel tank. We did not prepare to protect non-core components. In the coming years, our production capacity may decrease, and our sales revenue will be about $30 billion lower than forecasted. In 2019 and next year, our annual sales revenue will be about $100 billion, but maybe in 2021, we will regain our growth momentum and provide even better services to society. In the next 2 years, we are going to switch from many old product versions to new ones. In such a massive switchover, it will take time to test whether things work properly, so a moderate decline is understandable. But when this step is finished, we'll become stronger. When we were not as strong as in the past, we were determined to work more closely with U.S. companies. As we become stronger, we will work even more closely with them. Companies that are not as strong as Huawei might be very cautious when it comes to using U.S. components or U.S. elements. This will hurt the U.S. economy in one way or another, but Huawei will not hurt very much. We are already strong, and we can withstand whatever is thrown at us.
因为我们已经很坚强了，我们是打不死的鸟，对不对？
是吧？
At any rate, but we agree on that he would reconsider Huawei if we can make a trade deal. So clearly it's not about nationalism.
It's the United States that really will suffer from any effort to decouple.
华为是不会有任何的后门。
少量问题的挫折，我们也不能恨一个美国。
For the very first time.
谢谢。
Talking about basis of knowledge, I really need to ask Mr. Ren, because right now, Huawei's collaboration with quite a number of American universities and labs have been halted. And that is not going to contribute to the open science as we speak. But to Mr. Ren, though, it's also going to have a big impact on where Huawei could be in terms of your capacity for science and technology.
人类的这个社会的创造呢，就分成理论的创造、工程的创造和市场需求的创造。
Inventions can be divided into theoretical inventions, engineering inventions, and inventions driven by market demand. China is very strong in engineering inventions, but weak when it comes to theoretical research. We have to diligently learn from the West in this regard. The West took several hundred years to invent theories like calculus. They have contributed greatly to advancing basic theories.
我认为这一点来说，西方做出了很大贡献。华为公司虽然每年投入巨额的基金
Huawei invests heavily in R&D. We have more than 80,000 engineers. Despite that, we have not made any great inventions. Mobile communications were not invented by Huawei, nor were fiber communications, IP transmission, mobile internet, airplanes, cars, or horse-drawn carriages. When it comes to inventions, we make little contribution to humanity. We have focused on improving engineering capabilities. We are now supporting more than 300 universities and 900 research institutes around the world. In doing so, we hope that we can contribute to theoretical innovation. We will not cut our investment in this area just because of the attacks on Huawei. We will work harder. Even if the U.S. government does not allow some universities to work with us, there are many others who are willing to do so. It is understandable that a few universities are having concerns about working with us. It is just short-term because they don't know much about us. We welcome more U.S. politicians to come and visit Huawei themselves. Some of them may think we still live in grass huts and have long ponytails. If they come and look at Huawei's pace of innovation, they will believe that it is worthwhile to make friends with us and that we can be trusted.
他会觉得我们应该也是好朋友，应该是可以是可信的。
To you, Mr. Gilder. Talking about security earlier, Mr. Ren has mentioned about that. So there are a lot of questions whether Huawei has backdoors. But to you, whose security is it? Who will guarantee the security? Who are the ones to judge whether one system or another system has security or not?
Well, the question is an objective question, whether a specific telecom system can be tested, whether it is open. There are lots of technical remedies for the kinds of distrust that arises around this catastrophically insecure internet architecture that we find ourselves using today. Just as we have a catastrophically broken monetary system, we got which causes trade wars. We also have a catastrophically broken internet security system. And I think Huawei can contribute. Among all the companies in the world, Huawei is probably best situated to solve both these problems or to pursue both that single opportunity.
Is Mr. Gilder having too much hope for Huawei? Is he being too optimistic or pessimistic?
Well, I hope he's correct. And there's some evidence that he may be, because our president has already said publicly that he would reconsider Huawei if we can make a trade deal. So clearly it's not about national security. We don't trade national security. So it's about something else. And this trade war has got to end. And that, I believe, will end sooner rather than later. Crossing my fingers.
So we have 1 minute left, 1 minute only. Everybody, one sentence only, the biggest takeaway with the coffee with Ren today.
We mentioned that Huawei has no backdoors and our products are open, transparent, and trustworthy. But, this but is more important. But we will always have our front doors open. We welcome all, including the media, to come and visit us.
Thank you. Mr. Gilder, one sentence.
Huawei is at the epicenter of the future of technology in the world. With how the United States and other countries react to this campaign against Huawei is kind of a Huawei test for people around the world. And if they don't pass it, it will signify that the world is taking a very destructive turn, anathematizing particular companies in the name of vague ideological objections. And so it's the Huawei test, and I hope the world meets it.
It's an interesting and important case study, I guess.
Yeah.
Mr. Negroponte.
Yeah, I guess I would end by saying in going through that test, I would not focus on security and backdoors and whether you're going to interact with the Chinese government if they can. Leave that out. And I think you should focus on the 100,000 papers you publish, the amount of research, and just make it known. Because I feel I'm a lone voice. I'm at a dinner party and I say, Huawei is a great company. And people say it is. It does. And then the world has to know how much you're doing in science and technology.
Well, I guess the media need to know too, in a way. Now our colleagues are sitting here. They all got informed, at least through this, a little bit. Mr. Ren, it's a coffee with Ren, so you have to speak first.
The world relies on open collaboration for shared success.
That's it.
He gets an A+ as my student.
He did? For the very first test. And with that, we're wrapping up today's first Coffee with Ren. We hope there will be many coffees to come in the future in which we can talk and interact and certainly be intellectually stimulating for one another. And with that, we're coming to the end of today's program. If you'd like to see more, try to find us World Insight CGTN into your search engine or check out our YouTube channel. You can also follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Sina Weibo. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone on the World Insight team, thanks for watching and tune in again next time for more insights across China and around the world. The weekend is up. Have a lovely weekend, everyone.